Hi all. So today I wanted to do a video on why or how did I not know that I was being abused. So I'm just going to kick off with the very first one, which literally is that it felt familiar. It did feel familiar to me. I'd been raised in an environment with, a very authoritarian father who, didn't let me speak up for myself, that kind of thing. So I was used to walking on eggshells. I was used to not saying, my mind. I was used to being shut down. I was used to, trying not to rock the apple cart, that kind of thing, sidestepping, trying not to get in trouble, trying to stay away from trouble because, I'd be fearful of being smacked. That's just what it was. So obviously getting myself into a relationship as well, living in that environment felt familiar, like uncomfortable, but because I had a higher tolerance for it, because I'd lived that before. So it was being in that similar kind of like vibration, that similar energy, that even though consciously I always thought to myself, I'm never going to be with anybody, or I'm never going to marry anybody that's like, my dad, essentially. That's exactly who I ended up with, because subconsciously, the subconscious is a lot stronger than the conscious mind. So even though I said I didn't want this and I didn't want that, my subconscious was already programmed to kind of be almost attracted to that. So I was already predisposed to being with an abusive person. And I think there are studies that show that if you grew up in like a abusive household, you are more likely to get into an abusive relationship later on in life. So again, even for people out there who are struggling in abusive relationships and thinking, oh, the best thing for the child is, to stay in a two-parent home and stuff like that, that is not true, because your child is probably now more likely to be in an abusive relationship themselves. So we have to set the example, walk away, and show that, we do not support abuse. So the second kind of thing was, it was alluring, I would say. There was something off about the relationship, and I think it was alluring. It was something that was like, I didn't trust it, but it was like a mystery to me almost. So it was almost just like, I've never, like, there's something weird, there's something off key about this person. I can't really tell what it is right now, but as I said, it was like alluring, like, oh, I want to find out, kind of thing. It's kind of like those people in the horror movie, you hear a creak and instead of like running out the door, no, you're just like, oh, I wonder what that is, let's go check it out, kind of thing. Let's check it out. And then, that's what happened. So, it was that element of mystery, not really knowing what this person was. And that was kind of mysterious to me, to try and find out, to try and work him out, and that's another reason that I didn't know, because I couldn't work it out. I've never met anybody like that before, who kind of suffers with this, problem, basically. So it was very, very difficult to put my finger on what is going on, what is actually wrong with this person. I don't really understand you. So, I'm going to try and maybe, instead of running for the hills, I'm going to try and find out what's wrong with you, because obviously I'm a fixer and I have to try and fix everybody and that kind of thing. And everybody deserves love and everybody's a good person at heart and that kind of stuff. So I was kind of in a position where I put myself in danger to kind of, work him out, kind of thing. So that was another thing. Another thing that, another reason why I didn't know that this was an abusive relationship was the fact that it was not physical. And I think that is kind of the biggest thing for most people that are in, abusive relationships, because if the person isn't punching you in the face, it's very, very difficult to like say, oh, I'm being abused. But one thing that we need to know is that there's financial abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's psychological abuse, there's spiritual abuse, there's emotional, like there's so many other abuses, like it's not just physical. And I went into the relationship thinking like, oh, well, he doesn't hit me, so all this other stuff that he's doing, the fits of rage, the bursts of anger, the poking me, the provoking me, the emotional abuse, the isolating from friends and family, the spiritual abuse, like the financial abuse, all of that. I didn't really class it as abuse. I just thought they're like kind of like character flaws, but it is kind of abusive when the person is kind of like affecting your own personal, like, you know, mental health, essentially, making you feel bad about yourself, making you kind of doubt yourself, gaslighting you. Those kind of things are abuse, you know. But that was one reason why I didn't realize that it was abuse, because it wasn't physical, you know, at least not all the time anyway. You know, I was never punched in the face, you know, so that would have been a lot easier for me to identify and say, oh my goodness, I've just been punched in the face, this is abuse now. But if it's not physical, it can be very, very difficult to put your finger on and say this is emotional abuse, or this is spiritual abuse, or this is financial abuse, that kind of thing. Another reason why I didn't know that this was abuse as well was the spiritual bypassing, the explaining away of behavior in a kind of spiritual sense, you know, trying to kind of trying to mysticalize everything, you know, every little thing. Oh, you know, God did it, or, you know, it's a spiritual thing, or, you know, the devil did, you know, the devil, don't allow the devil to push you, don't allow the devil to use you, don't allow, you know, all this kind of like spiritual kind of like, you know, trying to make everything so mystical instead of just, no, you need to fix your behavior, you know, that kind of thing that made me feel like, you know, or not aware that this is actually abuse, because you're explaining away your bad behavior and trying to use like spirituality, trying to use religion, trying to use, you know, holy books to kind of explain away your behavior, like trying to use like scriptures and things like that to explain away the behavior. So that made it very, very difficult at the time for me to identify as well, because if I resonate with all of that spiritual kind of, you know, religious kind of stuff, it's very difficult, because this is kind of like laws that you're abiding by at the same time. So if that person is using spirituality to kind of confuse you and gaslight you, is very, very, very difficult, because it's almost like, okay, this person is saying this, but I also believe in this as well. So it's kind of like, okay, how do we kind of separate the two right here? So that makes it extremely, extremely, extremely difficult to know that this is abuse when they're trying to use like spirituality, scriptures, you know, that kind of stuff to bypass their behavior. I think another thing that I didn't realize that it was abuse was that it was very like coercive and controlling. And as of, I think, 2015 here in the UK, there was a new law called the Coercive and Controlling Behavior Act, I think it is, where it doesn't have to be physical abuse, but you can get your partner prosecuted for coercive and controlling behavior. I didn't know anything about coercive and controlling behavior before this either. So that was another reason, you know, there was, you know, checking my phone in the middle of the night, there was calling me and texting me multiple times in the day to find out where I am, or, you know, trying to poke holes at where I've been, or who I'm with and stuff like that. That's all like coercive and controlling behavior. And if we want to go a bit deeper than that, there's also kind of controlling, you know, your reproductive system, trying to, you know, dictate, you know, what kind of contraception that I'm allowed to use, or, you know, not allowed to use any, or that kind of stuff. So it's almost like a toxic care. So I'm mistaken that for, oh, this person really, really cares about me. You know, he's calling me all the time, he's texting me all the time, he wants to find out who I'm with, he wants to, you know, he cares about my well-being, he wants to know, you know, he wants to show up at every doctor's appointment that I'm going to, sort of thing. And that is literally coercive and controlling behavior, because obviously he didn't want me to kind of like, you know, go to the clinics. He wanted to find out what I was doing. Every like pill that he saw in the house, he was thinking that I'm on like birth control pills. He didn't want me to be on birth control pills, stuff like that. That's coercive and controlling behavior, because he's trying to coerce me to reproduce, essentially. But I'm mistaking that for care. Oh, he really cares, he's very concerned, that kind of thing, instead of seeing it as, no, this person is trying to control. I wasn't thinking that at the time. You know, I was just thinking, oh, he really cares about me, that kind of thing. Another point why I didn't know that this was an abusive relationship was the paradigms that I had of what it was to be in a relationship, you know, what it means to, you know, be a wife sort of thing, you know. Okay, so I'm thinking, instead of like, how does this feel for me? How am I feeling about this situation right now? Like, you know, with my intuition, I'm not even thinking like that. I'm thinking, what would a good wife do? What would a good Christian person do? What would, you know, a good girlfriend do? What would, you know, what is the best thing to do right now? So I'm doing it like mathematically, like, you know, my next moves, I'm working it out mathematically, you know, what would this kind of person do? Like, so it's almost like I'm playing a character, like what would this character do in this scenario, rather than actually just like feeling my intuition and actually paying attention to it and actually kind of letting that lead me. I don't feel really good about this right now. This is making me very uncomfortable. I don't feel comfortable with that. I'm very uncomfortable. This is abusive. Or I don't like the fact that I'm not able to voice myself, that kind of thing. So the paradigms of what I felt like I was expected to be doing or behaving, that kind of thing kind of didn't allow me to understand that this is abusive, because, you know, I wasn't allowing myself to feel that, you know. I wasn't allowing myself to sort of call it out, you know. I'm trying to do everything mathematically. Okay, if he behaves like this, then it means this. If he behaves like that, then it means that. Or this is the next step, or this is what this kind of person is supposed to do, instead of just kind of feeling that, you know. So I think my paradigm helped me to kind of stay stuck and not really wake up to the coffee that, you know, this is actually abuse. Another thing that kept me in that place and not knowing that I was being abused was obviously the power of suggestion and gaslighting, sort of distorting my reality, the power of suggestion, sort of planting seeds that certain things are going on when they're not going on, or trying to exaggerate a scenario, you know, just going back to the point about spiritual bypassing, you know, trying to make out like there's something mystical happening when there is not, you know, kind of thing, you know. It must be, you know, something spiritual, it must be some kind of spirit, it must be some kind of devil, it must be some kind of like, you know, the power of suggestion, you know. This friend did this because of that, you know, your family did this because of that, like trying to suggest things, trying to plant seeds, trying to gaslight me. That's why I didn't know, because I didn't know anything about gaslighting at the time, trying to distort my reality, kind of to control my reality and make me believe something else is going on than is actually going on. So that was something I didn't know was a form of abuse, gaslighting, trying the power of suggestion. That was another reason why I didn't really know that I was being abused, because I'm thinking, if this person cares about me, you know, if this person loves me, they're not trying to, like, you know, bring me down, destroy me, that kind of thing. That's ludicrous. So I thought, you know, I thought that was ludicrous at the time, but obviously not. Is actually the opposite, you know. So that kind of power of suggestion and gaslighting, I didn't understand that, okay, this is abuse, because I couldn't get my head around the fact that if I'm in a relationship with you, you should not be trying to destroy me, you know. That's what I just couldn't just get my head around it. So I had that trust. In order for someone to abuse you, the kind of first thing that they will require is that you trust them. And this is with any friend, this is with any relationship, this is with any kind of institution, you know. The element of trust has to be there in order for them to abuse you. And they know when they've securely hooked you, when you actually trust them. So that was another reason why I didn't know that I was being abused, because I trusted the person. And if you trust the person, you just think, okay, well, surely they want good for me, you know. And my final point of why I didn't know I was being abused is because I'd never experienced it before, you know. I'd never kind of known a friend that had been abused before, you know. I'd never seen a family member that had been abused before. So I'd never experienced it firsthand. So it was very confusing to me. It didn't make sense to me why this person was behaving like this, or why this person would say certain things, why this person would gaslight me, why this person would spiritualize everything, why this person, you know, it didn't make sense to me. So that's another reason that I didn't know I was being abused, because, you know, I'd never seen it before. I'd never experienced it before. But it's almost like now that I have experienced it, now that I know what it looks like, you know, again, it doesn't have to be physical. You know, the person does not have to punch you in the face for you to know that this is abusive. It could be spiritual abuse, it could be psychological abuse, financial abuse, like all of that kind of stuff, you know, emotional abuse, you know, making you feel bad about yourself, insulting you, that kind of thing, using your past against you. Yeah, if you've never seen that kind of thing before, you just don't know that it exists. Like, as I said before, that this person would deliberately do these things to you. So now that I'm kind of out of it, now that I know the signs and everything, I feel like a lot more confident about never being in this situation again, because now I know what it looks like, you know. So that was another reason I never knew what it looked like, you know, to be abused. I'd always said to myself, I will never be that person. I will never be a victim of abuse. Nobody could ever abuse me, you know, that kind of thing. And it was so crazy that it actually happened to me. And that's why I'm so kind of passionate about sharing my story with, you know, everybody, because it's crazy. Like, it can happen to anybody. Like, and I would have never thought, as I said, that it would happen to me. Even friends and family have come and told me, like, I just can't believe that you were abused, you know. And that's the thing, you know, it doesn't have to be a weak and meek, you know, feeble person to be abused. Like, it can literally happen to anybody. It can happen to men, it can happen to women, it can happen in same-sex relationships. Like, you know, the abuse is real. Abuse is real, you know. And you know, it can happen in institutions as well. You know, it can happen in your job, it can happen in your place of faith, it can happen anywhere. So just shedding the light on that. A few reasons why I didn't know that I was being abused until I actually came out of the relationship and actually looked back and thought, oh, okay, this is why, you know, actually doing the work on myself, this is why, you know, how did I not know this was abuse, you know, that kind of thing. So I really hope that you've liked this video. Please do share it out to who you think it might be useful for. Do leave me a comment, and do like and subscribe if you are on YouTube. Thank you for listening.